Awesome, thank you. So welcome to the Introduction to the EIR program for Teachers webinar presented by myself, Vanessa Raponi, and
Skylar Brown.
Nice to meet you all. All right,
So here's a little look at the behind the scenes of the EIR program team. So the EIR program is part of Engineers of Tomorrow, and that team is made up of Erica Lee Garcia and Becky White, who are the team managers, and then Vanessa Raponi and I are both here for the summer working with them.
So a little bit about what Engineers of Tomorrow is and does. So we're a venture of Engineers Without Borders Canada. We partner with engineering companies, professional associations, and educators to transform the engineering profession. Our goals are to improve diversity, have an ability to learn from failure, innovate, and solve the most important problems of the 21st century. We believe in the power of engineering outreach to shape the future, and that is why we do world-class engineering outreach, and we inspire and instill capacity in others to do the same. Our ultimate goal is to shape the public's perception of engineering in order to change its future. So these are kind of the goals and missions of EOT. So one of our many ways that we achieve these is through running the EIR program. Another way we achieve our goal is by encouraging engineers to tell their stories. So Skylar and I are going to share our stories. Skylar, do you want to tell your engineering story for the group?
Sure. So my engineering story, first of all, I'll start off by saying I'm going into my third year of chemical engineering at the University of New Brunswick. And my engineering story starts when I was pretty young because my dad was a civil engineer. Unfortunately, there was a little bit of disconnect between what he did and what I thought he did. And it really shows how messaging is very important in a child's life, because I grew up asking him, what would you do for your job, Dad? And he would be like, oh, well, I mapped the land, and he marked boundary lines on a map. And that kind of like sounds really boring to me. And the perception of engineering I had was that it was just math and science, and I didn't even really know how that related to that. So anyway, I never really considered it as a career option all through high school. Despite being really interested in the sciences and math, it just never occurred to me that engineering would be for me. It wasn't until I went away for my first year at university and was studying kinesiology when I was talking to some of my female floor mates who were in engineering. And they kind of showed me how broad and diverse it can be, and that it's not just a stereotype that I had in my mind. And from there, I decided to try it out and switch into it because it sounded like everything I loved. And I'm still loving it. So that's my story.
Awesome. So I had a very different experience from Skylar. There was barely anyone in my family that had gone to university, let alone being a full-fledged engineer. So I kind of just grew up with my mom encouraging me to take all the sciences and maths to, quote, keep my options open, even though she didn't exactly know what that meant. So essentially I just was always in the sciences and maths and twiddling my thumbs about my future, not really knowing where to go, and having limited guidance as well. And basically one day in grade 12, when I was really under the pressure to make a decision, I was hanging out with a friend of mine who was a year older than me, who's attending chemical engineering at U of T, and he kind of just walked me through a little bit about what chemical engineering is, what his school life was like, what the profession is. He gave me a lot of encouraging words about how he believed I could do it. And just a week later, I also had a different conversation with a friend's dad about who worked at Bombardier Aerospace, and he was talking to me about the aerospace industry, about what engineers do at Bombardier, what he could see me doing, and also, again, encouraging me to go into engineering. So it was these two conversations in that really critical point of my life that really persuaded me to go for it and apply to the field of engineering. Now I'm at just finishing 4 out of 5 years of my materials engineering degree with a one-year addition of management, or equivalent to the first-year MBA. And similar to Skylar, very, very much enjoying my time, having popped into a few industries during my co-op and through my experience working for Engineers of Tomorrow, both last summer and this summer, really understanding a perspective of the profession as a whole, and ultimately just being really proud to call myself an engineer.
So what is an engineer? On the very surface level, by definition, a Canadian engineer, you first have to get an undergraduate degree in engineering from an accredited school, which typically takes 4 to 5 years. And then at this point, once you graduate, you're an engineering training and you receive an iron ring. And then after this, to actually become a professional engineer, you have to work for additional 4 years in an engineering type job and then apply for a professional engineering license. But what really is engineering? So everyone has this idea of engineering mind, like, oh, they solve problems. But like realistically, it's so much more than that. An engineer can be someone who hopes to change the world, someone who wants to improve the lives of other people, someone who uses imagination and creativity to turn ideas into reality, and so much more. And this isn't necessarily what most people think about when they think of an engineer, but it's how I have grown to see it and how we really hope other people will start to see it as well. And we also think it's really good messaging for students because it's way more inclusive and it brings in a more diverse group of people into engineering than just the stereotypical people we always see going into it.
Speaking of stereotypes, right now if you Google the word engineering or engineer, this is what will come up. You will have this beautiful plethora of images. So let's talk about this for a minute. Everyone get your typing fingers ready. What do you see when you see this list or this group of photographs? What are some commonalities that pop out to you out of these images? Things that are similar in the different pictures in front of you. It can be anything you think is similar. So there's going to be a couple moments of the webinar where we encourage you to type in your answers. So this is one of them. If you want to, got Alice and Raj. If you want to type in some thoughts. Skylar, what do you see as a commonality in all of these pictures?
For the most part, they're all wearing hard hats.
Yes, hard hats. I see a lot of men.
Mm-hmm. See a lot of blueprints.
Blueprints, yeah. So let's see what we've got here. Yeah, we have, yes, mostly men wearing hard hats and holding blueprints. And ultimately, it's just not really representative of the reality of what engineering is, right? It's perpetuating a stereotype that you have to fit into a box in order to be an engineer. It's really limiting in terms of the reality. And Skylar, was this maybe something you thought of when you were growing up?
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought an engineer was like.
Exactly. So this is something that we're really hoping to push away from, especially in terms of how we message engineering to little kids. So that's back to where we come in as the Engineer in Residence program.
So the Engineer in Residence program is the Professional Engineers of Ontario, or PEO. It's their flagship outreach program. The program pairs engineers with schools to give presentations, do activities, and inspire students in the area of science, technology, engineering, and math. So what the program hopes to accomplish is to promote engineering and STEM by ultimately bringing in a role model engineer to the classroom, to put a face to the profession, to engage students with hands-on activities, and use really inclusive messaging to engage all students, not just like the ones who would necessarily already be fit for engineering based on the stereotypes we have. And one really big thing we'd like to emphasize is that the goal is to create a positive experience around STEM in youth. It's not necessarily to recruit people to be students to be engineers, but just have them one positive experience or several over the course of the year. It's something they can look back on and hopefully think back to how much they enjoyed it and maybe consider STEM as a career option or something they'd like to spend more time in even.
Yeah, definitely. The goal of the EIR program is not to mass produce engineers. It's just to have kids feel like it's a possibility for them. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some logistics 101 for the EIR program, as presumably you're new to the program in order to get this introductory training. So I worked here last summer, so this is kind of some words of wisdom from experience. So first and foremost, it's critical to define expectations with your EIR. This really is going to be a partnership, this whole experience, so it's really important to communicate and talk to each other. So what are the goal? How are you going to reach the goal of having the EIR come into the classroom once a month? What are you going to do in terms of coming up with relevant content as a team? For instance, we highly encourage that the content is aligned with the curriculum, so the engineer needs to know what the curriculum is throughout the year, and in order to keep things as clear as possible for the kids. Next, we want to decide on the methods of communication and frequency. So are you emailing? Are you phoning? Are you having monthly in-person meetings? It's really important to decide that and come up with a plan. Next, the EIR should be generally making hands-on society-based programming, such as what's available on our website. So one great activity we like to reference back to is one of our bridge building activities. So it's really common for engineers to have some sort of bridge building activity, maybe the marshmallow challenge, you've heard of it. However, what we encourage to take that a bit further is, instead of just building a bridge and talking about forces and structures, go a step further and where will the community put the bridge? What will be most important for getting from point A to point B? What is necessary and why? So really adding that societal context to things. And lastly, we highly, highly encourage you to contact us, specifically Becky, who's CC'd on your email of RebeccaWhite@ewb.ca. Contact us if anything is going wrong. We're going to be checking in on you occasionally, but ultimately it's going to be communication between you and your EIR during your partnership. So it's really, really important to loop us in the event of an issue.
Now we're going to get to the interactive part of this webinar, which is frequently asked questions about the EIR program. So we're going to be presenting you with scenarios, and then you can respond as to what you think would be the appropriate way to deal with this scenario.
Before we continue, Raj and Alice, can you just give us a quick confirmation that you're able to hear us? And okay, perfect. All right, so our first scenario is classic communication issues. You are excited to have the EIR program in your classroom next year, but you haven't heard from your EIR yet. You're frustrated and you're worried that your students won't get to experience the exciting learning opportunities that the program offers. What do you do? So Alice and Raj, let's hear what your thoughts are. Skylar, you ever have communication issues with folks?
I do sometimes. Sometimes people just don't check their emails. It gets really frustrating. But, you know, if it's something important, sometimes I pick up the phone and call them, and usually I get answers faster that way.
Great. Well, Alice notes that she's already contacted her. Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm really glad to hear about that. So we're kind of talking about the scenario where, say you've contacted your EIR, but your EIR doesn't respond for like a month, and you're wondering what's going on. So what we're preparing for in the event this happens is we encourage you to call the program coordinator. Yes, that's definitely one idea. So first and foremost is trying to reach out to your EIR through various methods of communication. So email, phone, various things. The idea is that communication is ultimately a two-way street. But yes, you are very correct, Alice. In the event that it's really just not working out, The idea is to reach out to our EIR team, which is us, and because we're always here to help, and we can maybe leverage other methods, and maybe the more the merrier in terms of communication.
So scenario 2 is curriculum issues. So your EIR is doing a fantastic job at engaging students and getting them excited about STEM, but what they've been teaching just doesn't line up with the curriculum, and you're worried that you won't have time to cover everything you need to over the school year with the EIR taking up 1 class per month. What do you do?
Really tricky one. Definitely something we'd love to hear about from teachers, because curriculum stuff is critical, and I know there's lots of guidelines and restrictions and goals, so we'd love to hear what you would come up with in this scenario.
I know from our webinar earlier, one of the answers we got, or actually 2 of the answers we got, were both saying that the learning is more important than the curriculum, which kind of surprised me a little bit because, I mean, that's great. It's just it wasn't the answer we were necessarily expecting, so we'd love to hear what you think.
Yeah, and I agree that I was under the impression that there were lots of rather stringent guidelines for the curriculum. So it was really exciting and encouraging to hear that teachers were ultimately putting the learning of the students first and had that sort of flexibility. So we've got the message, since EIR is coming monthly, I will select the project that will align with the last unit of the year. Perfect. So yeah, that's also a great idea. So basically pre-planning, really coming up with a game plan for the curriculum ahead of time. I like that.
So what we suggest is talk to your EIR specifically about what you'd like them to cover. Chances are there are several real-world applications and activities they can either modify or tie directly. Also, you can look through the resources and activity ideas on our website yourself, and if you find something you think is interesting or that aligns to the curriculum, most of the things on there can be modified to suit most grade levels by making it easier, more complex. And then finally, email us because we're here to help. So if you're really stuck with ideas, we can definitely come up with a few.
Kind of a reoccurring theme here, you'll notice. All right, next one we have is difficulty engaging students. So your EIR is really excited to be part of the program and share their knowledge and experience with students, but it's really clear that it's their first time doing this sort of thing, and they're kind of struggling to engage and relate to students. What do you do? Skylar and I were chatting earlier about our experiences as kids, and for me, I very rarely am in front of kids. I get a little nervous in front of kids, feel like they're judging me, and definitely it's not the audience I normally talk to. What about you, Skylar?
Yeah, definitely. I don't really come in contact with them on a day-to-day basis anymore. It can definitely be struggling. Like, aside from the work I did as a camp counselor when I was younger, it really took a lot of practice learning to communicate with kids, especially now that we're older. Being able to relate to them on that level, it can definitely be challenging for people who haven't really talked to kids in a very long time.
Agreed. Yeah, so Alice has a great response. Work on making the EIR comfortable with the students and introduce themselves to the EIR. That's great. So what we've suggested is some ways, do some fun team building activities. I love that as well. So we suggest ways for them to engage the students that have worked for you, because ultimately you know your students best. You're the teacher, you're the boss. If there's something specific you think that they can improve on, it's also a really good idea to just be honest and work on some constructive criticism. It's, generally speaking, everyone in our program is really excited to be there. They want to improve themselves and the lives of the students and their futures, so they will most likely be very open to hearing how they can improve.
Scenario 4, teaching situation changes. So let's just say you're halfway through the school year and the program's going great, your students are loving it, but unfortunately for personal reasons you have to go on leave. What do you do?
Yeah, we actually have this happen quite a bit where someone is unable to to stay halfway through. Raj, I see your mic's on. Do you want to contribute to this question? All right, that's fine. I'm just going to put you back on mute. Becky, I think you're. All right. So while you're thinking into, so talk with the EIR to make a contingency plan in order to carry on. That's definitely a really good idea. It's really important to have a backup plan.
So most importantly, let us know as soon as you can, just because you may not think it's a big deal right now, but if we have your name listed as a teacher contact, it can be very difficult, especially for figuring out things for the following year or getting in contact with people if something comes up. So definitely let us know, and also we can try and help sort out the situation if there is something you can do. Other than that, see if the teacher who's replacing you is interested in continuing to host an EIR on a monthly basis so your students can still get that learning opportunity out of it. Otherwise, maybe just talk around your school a little bit, see if there's another teacher who's interested in the program, so at least the EIR can stay at the school and it can be fun to use at your school. So
awesome. So now we're kind of just going to have some free discussion time. So we've gone through 4 scenarios that we think are common, frequently asked, general concern. But what did we not talk about? What else were you wondering? Especially, I know we've got some first-time teachers on the call, so we'd love to hear what else you're concerned about or interested to learn more about, or any questions you have. Now is your opportunity for sure. Can EIR work with more than one class? For example, my grade team partners class. All right. So we the whole concept of or what makes our program unique is that we have the volunteer influence the students on multiple occasions. So say you have a group of 40 kids or 30 kids, they're not meeting the engineer once for one presentation and then never seeing them again. They're able to develop a relationship over the whole school year and see them multiple times. So that is relevant to your question in 2 ways. Firstly, the fact that are both classrooms going to be capable on a monthly basis of participating in the activity and attending the presentations? And secondly is the engineer's capacity. Are they comfortable and able to, with 2 teachers and themselves, manage that many students? Are they able to, are you able to work out the time commitment so that it's roughly the same? These are the kinds of things to factor in. So, however, ultimately, it's up to the EIR and teacher to make a decision on something like this. So if your engineer is okay with it, then by all means, it really is dependent.
Sorry, can I just add one thing in there, Vanessa?
Yes,
thank you. If that does happen, we would just ask that you please let us know, because we like to keep track of who's with which class. So just please let us know if that does end up happening.
Yes, agreed, for sure. What is the EIR's time commitment per month in the classroom? So we ask for one presentation or activity per month, and we assume that would be within, say, a science class or maybe a math class. We often tell them you'll probably only get 1 to 2 hours in front of the students, and then we factor in preparation time and travel time, and we estimate it's a round of 5 to 6 hour per month commitment on their end. Might be a little bit more than that. So it's, but again, very much dependent on the engineer and the teacher. For instance, you want to talk about John Ball?
Yeah, one of our EIRs, he is retired and he goes above and beyond. He actually volunteers as an EIR in 2 different schools. And I forget what his exact numbers are, but he had we had about 2 visits per week.
Yeah.
There was a lot.
Yeah. So he's an example of a retired EIR with lots of time, and he's been an EIR for almost a decade now, so has developed a very close relationship with the teacher. They've come up with a very, very thorough plan. So that's like one extreme, and the other is that some engineers are able to come in maybe meeting the once a month time frame, and they're a few hours a month. Any other questions from the group? I think we had someone ask in the previous webinar about age ranges. So we commented about how there's you can tailor the content for the different age ranges. So you can make them more complex. You can make them simpler. It really depends on what the topic is and how you go about it. I'm hoping that we'll do hands-on inquiry activities during EIR visit time.
Well, that is exactly what we promote as part of the program. We do believe that students learn best doing hands-on activities. Anything you can get them thinking and designing and coming up with solutions on their own and getting them excited about it, that is what we really encourage. So although we do some presentations, we really do focus on hands-on activities.
Yeah, definitely something you should expect to see for sure. Any other thoughts from anyone? All right. Well, so next up, we just wanted to remind everyone about the resources we have available. So we know that as a teacher, you have to wear many different hats. You have to be an artist and a mathematician, and you have to put on all these different hats and take on these different characters. And we created a webinar as Engineers of Tomorrow for called it Wearing Your Engineering Hat. So helping to get teachers familiar with that. We highly, highly encourage you to watch that. Next, we have a newsletter that we definitely encourage you to subscribe to. And we also have our website we encourage you to check out for ideas and presentations. We also have a note. So my EIR is a structural engineer in the field. He seems to be quite focused on structure. Any suggestion to get him thinking beyond structural engineering? Yes, definitely. So hopefully he will be attending the engineer version of the EIR Introduction Program webinar, because we're going to be touching on, moving away from your own field, because that definitely is something that's really important to, especially because a structural engineer is more in the classic, quote-unquote, stereotypical thought of an engineer, that we want to make sure that they're not being too focused. So yeah, definitely I'd encourage him to see the webinar. B, I feel like it would be great for you to just full-on express to him that you're looking for more than just structural engineering, and you'd love to see a more holistic approach. And then lastly, if he doesn't really seem to be that responsive, just send him our way, and we can chat with him more about what our expectations and goals are about the program. So hopefully that helps. All right, and yeah.
So here we have some upcoming webinars for you to know about. 2 of them are more specifically tailored to the engineers. However, everyone's welcome to attend and kind of get maybe a different perspective than they would usually get. So the Introduction to the EIR program for EIRs is coming up on July 12th, and that is kind of like we're doing right now. However, it's more tailored to the EIRs, like I said. We're also doing one on diverse and inclusive messaging, so the focus on this is just talking about engineering in a way that doesn't just attract us people who would already kind of fit an engineering role, who fit into society's kind of thoughts and stereotypes about what an engineer is. it's more inclusive to everyone, a diverse group of students. So talking more about possibly like the imagination and creativity side or the teamwork and collaboration side instead of just like the math and science problem solving side. We're also going to do sharing your engineering story on August 16th. And this is kind of what Vanessa and I did earlier, just telling your engineering story in a way that is engaging to students that they can relate to and that will stick with them. And then last but not least, there's an in-person orientation coming up September 16th in Toronto. It's not mandatory for anyone to be there, I believe.
Yeah, just highly covered. So yeah, what will be covered in the session? It's definitely encouraged for you to attend. It's almost a full day orientation, which is basically just a lot more details. It's a great opportunity for you to ideally meet with your engineer and work together. There'll be some sample activities. Maybe Becky has something to add. Have you been at the last one?
Yeah, it was just a great opportunity to connect, in person for those who can attend, but we did even have some people who attended virtually last year as well. We can really just go deeper into some of the topics we touched on in the very beginning of the session today. It's also an opportunity, if you're new to the program, it does happen fairly regularly that the teacher and their EIR that they've been matched with both end up attending. So it's nice, just a nice opportunity to sometimes be able to connect with your own EIR before they get into your classroom if you haven't been able to do that in-person meeting before then.
And I think that ties in well with the other comment we see here, questioning when the teacher and EIR should be first in contact. So we highly recommend, we had the goal of sending out all the introduction emails just before school was out by the end of June. So fingers crossed all teachers received that email before summer kickoff and are able to ideally have a meeting over the summer, whether it's right at the beginning of July or near the end of August, trying not to influence their vacation time. So the goal, I would say, is to contact at least those initial emails should happen as soon as possible on both ends. But the in-person meeting, as outlined in your introduction email, which is encouraging you to set up introductions, make some plans, talk about communication, all that. It's all laid out in that introduction email. We highly encourage that to happen at some point over the summer, as long as it's just before September when you're actually in the classroom. So hope that helps. And now at this point, we're just asking for any questions, comments, or concerns. Hopefully, we've addressed everything that you can think of right now. And if not, we're always available for to be emailed, and we highly encourage you to connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, both for Engineers of Tomorrow as well as the Engineering Residence Program. Special highlight of our @EOT-EWE Twitter is definitely our most active account where you can communicate with us very frequently. So I'm not seeing any extra comments, so thank you for hosting. Oh, you're very sweet. Thank you. No, thank you both for attending.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, have a great evening and a great summer, and hopefully lots of success with the Engineering Residence Program.